Let's take a look at a simple example of using the REST API to work with blobs in Azure Storage.
Everything in the Azure API, at the heart of it, is available through a REST API. And that certainly applies to Azure Storage Services as well. However, in general, if you can use one of the SDKs, if you're using .NET or Java or Python, etc., if you can use an SDK, it's generally going to be a lot easier. Now, I'm going to show you a couple things, but one of the biggest things that you're going to find is it can be a bit of a challenge when using the REST API is the authentication concept. I'm going to show you a couple different things related to this. All right, I've got an example here, and full credit to the person that did this. This is a MSDN blog, so I figured it'd probably be good to show you. And you certainly, I'd recommend looking this up. All right, if I wanted to authenticate against the REST API for storage directly, and I wanted to use the key, for example, the storage key to do that, the process is actually pretty complex. And I've got the code that you can see here. I'm not going to go through it all. This is code for a just very simple process. This, I think, is getting a queue message. But what's important is you have this process of really complex process of building the header. Not only do you have to build a very specific header for the authentication and actually for the REST API in general, you have to actually get a signature from it, an encryption signature from it, and that's the you can see that HMAC SHA 256 kind of halfway down there, and that's a process. So this is all code for what would be a fairly simple process. I think this is, as I said, retrieving data from queue storage. But the point is, it doesn't matter what type of storage. If you're going to use the actual access keys, that's how you would do it. Now, there is another alternative, and that is to use a shared access signature. And if you are going to use the REST API, and if you can generate a shared access signature, let's say through some service-based code, and this is where the valet key pattern could be so powerful because it can generate this for you and give it to you. In fact, we're going to take a look at kind of a simplified version of that. Okay. So that would be the challenge of going through and using the REST API. The authentication process, the header process is a bit difficult. Okay. But what I'm going to show you now are some alternatives to that. All right, and in a very simple way, I'm just going to go in and retrieve an image. So I've got a storage account, and I'm in my Azure portal, my current portal, and I'm going to go to the blobs for the account, and I've got a container called images, and I'm just going to click on that container. And I've got within that container an access policy. And right now, the access policy is set to container. And what that means is that I've got anonymous access to the items in the container, and I can also actually list I can interact with the container itself. I'll just do a very simple thing and just show you one of the objects here and how it works and how it can be a little more difficult. Okay. So I'm going to take a look at, let's just look at Microsoft.png, which I did a Bing search for license-free things. I'm hoping Microsoft doesn't come after me for using this one. But in any case, when I click on that, if I go to the properties for the blob, notice it's got a URL. Fantastic. I'm going to go and just copy that URL. Now I'm going to pop up and paste that URL in. And if all goes well, I get the very cool, very subtle Microsoft logo. Fantastic. All right, so as long as there's no need to authenticate, everything is fantastic. However, that's not always practical or even desirable. So for example, if I go to the access property of my images container, and I change the access property from container to private, and that means there's no anonymous access at all, and notice it updated pretty quickly. Now, if I go over here to my image and I try to refresh the image, I get a result back that tells me you can't do that. You can't do that because you don't have rights to do that. Okay, now remember, I'm doing this very simply. This is just a retrieval of an image. You can update images, load images through REST API, but I figure if you see it here with the retrieval, then it would at least give you that basis for everything else. Well, now how would I deal with that? Well, the easiest way to deal with that is actually, if I come over here, I have this, for the account itself, I have this shared access signature. Okay. And I can create, and this actually gives me a lot of flexibility. If you can, kind of take a look at all the different options that are available here, I can create what's called a shared access signature for different services, blob, file, queue, or table. What can use or what can access it, service, container, or down to the object level. What permissions are available, and there's different permissions that apply to different storage types, like the table permissions are slightly different than the blob permissions. I can specify a start and expiration time for the signature itself, and then I can go ahead and generate a signature. Now you have to be a little careful, and the way I'm doing this now is not really the absolute best way to create a shared access signature. I'm doing it a little bit quick and dirty. If you want to really create a shared access signature, you should do it via a policy, and I actually will have another demo where I show that. Okay, the problem with creating this based on a key is if I want to, for some reason, if I need to invalidate this shared access signature and take away the rights that it would confer, I would actually have to change the key, which would change the key for everything. And I only have 2 access keys, so I could be, essentially breaking a lot of other things to get rid of a shared access signature. Having something called a policy can be a more effective way of doing that. Again, we'll take a look at how to do that later. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and generate the shared access signature here. Now, it gives me, when I do this, and you need to take this, if you're going to do this through the portal, you can actually create this through your PowerShell as well. It can also be created, as I'll show you later, through the API. But in any case, you want to make sure you get the token. So the token is actually a series of query string attributes, name, value, pair attributes in the query string, including the version, what the rights are, a signature for the shared access signature itself. In any case, I'm going to simply copy that. Okay, so that's the token, and then I'm going to come up here to my blob where I could not retrieve the blob, simply paste on that token, and now run, and now I can do that, right? And the cool thing about that is that, if, again, thinking about using the valid key pattern where I've got, some kind of service application, it generates that shared access signature token for me and sends it to me, then I simply put that in a URL anytime I'm using the REST API, and that becomes a lot easier than going through, all of this code, having to make sure I use the key, that I create the right signature based on the key, that I've got the right pattern in the header to match that signature. All right, a whole lot easier to generate the SAS, and also then I'm not having to use the actual key outside of a very protected environment. So definitely, if you are going to use the REST API, you want to take a look at generating your shared access signature tokens in order to authenticate any of your operations.
Remember, the REST API is going to be universal, right? But you also do have SDKs that make it a little bit easier, a little bit more natural to work within a variety of languages, not just .NET.